All right. Hello. Hi, and welcome everybody. Roseanne, hi. I saw you just earlier. Um, all right, so we'll give it another minute or so as everybody's joining the call and getting settled in. My name is Yenny. I'm the founder and CEO here at Kari Prehab, and you've joined one of our Meet the Expert sessions, which we hold approximately monthly. And these are a really nice way for us, selfishly, to get to connect with our community, which is all of you, and also to be able to answer your questions, whether those questions are about exercising for bone density in general, about something that is specific to your situations that you'd like answers to directly from our expert coaches here. Or maybe you have questions about our program, which is an evidence-based exercise program specifically for osteoporosis. So and it's all fair game essentially, and this is just designed to be a really friendly and informal environment in which you guys can all get your questions answered and get multiple different perspectives and viewpoints from these wonderful coaches who all have very broad and deep, but also diverse backgrounds, so they can come at it from multiple different angles. And the way that this works is again very informal. So you can drop your questions into the chat at any time, and we'll get to them as they are showing up in the chat there. If you prefer, you can also just unmute yourself and ask your question. As a heads up, this session is being recorded, and we do share it with our newsletter subscribers afterwards because there's often so much good information and content that's really valuable for others to hear as well. So if you'd prefer not to have your likeness or your voice on the recording, then the chat is going to be the way to go for you. So go ahead and start dropping your questions whenever they pop into your head into the chat. The other thing that we often do on these calls is answer questions that come to us via email or are left as comments or questions on our social media videos. So I actually had a email exchange with somebody just yesterday that I thought would be really good to kick the conversation off with because it was a very brief exchange, but it somehow hit on so many myths, misconceptions, misunderstandings, fears, and concerns that people often have when it comes to exercising with osteoporosis. So let's go ahead and start just kind of unpacking some of what was in this email exchange because I think it'll be interesting for everybody to hear. So for a little bit more context, this person was responding to one of our newsletters that talks about the tissue health benefits, including for bone tissue, of this movement cat-cow, which if you've ever done yoga, you know it's a movement, a very gentle rounding and arching of the spine that happens in a tabletop or hands and knees position. So this newsletter was talking about some of the musculoskeletal benefits that can come from doing this movement. Her response to the email was, I'm sure you know the study done in the 1990s by Sanaki, which determined any spinal flexion with osteoporosis should be discouraged. I'm not a fan of your post. I think you should discourage all spinal flexion regardless if it is unweighted. Lots to unpack there. Karen, do you maybe want to kick us off?
Sure, happy to. So, for spinal movement in general, we want to make sure that we're moving our spine in all of the different ways that it can move on a regular basis, because that is exactly what allows us to maintain our mobility. In addition to that, the little discs that are in between each vertebra in our spine, they have no direct blood supply. So the way that they get nourishment is actually through gentle compression and release when we move in different directions, laterally, front to back, with rotation. And that helps to hydrate the discs. And that hydration in between the discs also has a protective effect on the spine and the vertebra as well. So it's like a cushioning system, it's a little bit of protection. And so if we completely stop doing those movements, we lose the capacity to do them. And, in that email that Yenny is referring to, she was talking about doing those things unloaded, which means you're just doing them with your own body weight. And When we do them loaded, holding a weight, that becomes something different when we have osteoporosis. In that case, then we might need to take into consideration keeping a more neutral posture because now the vertebrae are under load. And so there are two different ways that we need to approach that. Unloaded, we need to maintain mobility. When we're using load, we need to have a little bit more mindful awareness about our posture.
Yeah, great answer. And I think, the flexion thing is obviously something that causes concern for people. Michaela, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about um, what it is in what it is that actually makes flexion risky and how orientation to gravity also plays into this cat-cow movement being kind of what we're still talking about here.
Sure. So the reason that flexion or rounding forward through the spine is a little bit more risky when you have osteoporosis is because of an increased risk of compression fractures. The bones tend to compress or have compression fractures happen towards the front of the vertebra. So if you imagine that kind of circular vertebra shape towards the front of your body, so more forward towards your rib cage, that area is more susceptible to the compression fractures. So when we round forward, we are placing more weight onto that part of the vertebra. And you can think of that when you're standing up tall. If I was to round my spine forward, you can kind of hopefully envision how that would place more weight on the front of the vertebra because the force of gravity is coming from above and I've got that compressive load coming from gravity. When we take that and we tip it into a tabletop shape, that we're taking a lot of that compressive force off the body. We're essentially unloading that flexion. So then when we start to move through that cat-cow, that's where we get all of those benefits that Karen was just mentioning for the muscle, the muscular skeletal system, and the discs themselves. So that relationship to gravity has a really big role in when flexion is more or less safe, in addition to the loading externally from weights or a weight vest, for example.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the external load obviously increases the amount of compression that is happening on the spine, and then other things can also slightly up the risk factor too. If you're doing something very repeatedly or under heavy load, or if you're doing it with a lot of momentum where you're swinging side to side and you don't have good muscular control over the range of motion that you're coming in and out of. So these are all things that can increase the risk. But these are not variables in a relatively unweighted, unloaded position like the tabletop cat cow in a very moderate range of motion, which is what we would always be doing in yoga anyway. Kenny, I wonder if you can tackle this next one because I thought your reaction when we talked about this earlier was like really right on point. So this is the next part of the email conversation where we've kind of covered all of this and explained it. And this person responded by saying, "Oh, thank you for the clarification. That makes total sense for sure." And then she went on to say, "I encourage my clients to stay in neutral all the time, even without bone loss. These days with the computer and phone, so many are in flexion and don't even realizing. So I stress neutral at all times when teaching." Kenny.
Yeah, yeah. So my response to that was kind of like, that's a very kind of stiff approach to the subject, and we all know how impossible it is to go through life with never ever flexing our spine, right? Think about putting on a seatbelt, for instance, something we do every single day, like the rotation aspect of putting on a seatbelt, right? Our spine is rotating. There's a little bit of very, very little forces going on there underneath our body weight and our control. So one of my comments to what you're all saying is kind of like the dose makes the poison with this kind of stuff. So, making sure that you're working within your boundaries and your means, and say for cat and cow, for instance, right? That's a body weight exercise in a moderate range of motion. So just ensuring that we're not going outside of our capabilities and flexing with heavy weight or doing something outside of our control that we can handle. So living in this plane of being extremely stiff and robotic and walking around with ever flexing our spine is just not reasonable. And like Karen hinted on, right, those tissues need that movement and they need that blood supply to remain healthy and to remain moving and make sure that everything continues to move. Our spine is designed to curve and flex and bend and rotate. So all those things together need to happen, or else the tissue will just simply stop responding. So, yeah, keeping it in an unflexed position. It'd be actually a fun experiment to try that for like, I don't know, 20 minutes. Try to exist without ever flexing your spine. Like try to pick something up with an absolutely perfect spine. It would be pretty challenging. So, yeah, that's kind of my take on that response.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, it's impossible to stay in neutral even when you're walking. Like your spine
Right.
is shifting in and
Yeah.
out of neutral the whole time.
Right.
That was a perfect answer. And I also this made me realize that I totally forgot to have you guys introduce yourselves, which is a major faux
That's
pas
okay.
on my end. Let's have a little bit of context here, Kenny. Why don't you
Yeah.
do a quick intro for yourself?
Well, hello. Yeah, so I'm Coach Ken or Ken Rhodes. I am a senior coach here at Kari. I've been working with the program for I think almost 3 years now. I lead people through the cohorts from start to finish, answer all of your questions, review the subject matter, the videos, all the content and the programming. I'm the boots on the ground, responding to your daily questions, messages, emails, leading Zoom calls, doing these Meet the Experts. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to meeting you and hearing your questions, and hopefully see you in an upcoming cohort that we have coming up soon.
Awesome. Thanks. Let's work in reverse. Michaela, maybe you want to go next.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Michaela. I'm the program director and the co-creator of the program. We took myself and the other co-creator, Sarah, we have an in-person version of this program, and we really wanted to be able to reach more people. So we partnered with Kari to turn it into a virtual program, and now we have successfully reached more people and are really happy to be improving bone density across the nation and even in other countries. My background is mostly in yoga, so I started as a yoga teacher, and then I kind of fell into working with women with osteoporosis and ended up just absolutely loving it. And as a result of that, I went on to get my strength training certifications and have since been working with this population for, gosh, almost 10
A
years.
while.
Yeah,
Yeah, long time.
quite
Yeah.
some time. And so I'm just really passionate about supporting people to take what can feel like a really scary diagnosis into something that feels much more empowered and manageable.
Thanks so much. Karen.
Hi, everybody. My name is Karen. I am one of the senior coaches here at Kari. I have a very similar background to Michaela. I started out as a yoga instructor. If yoga was enough to improve bone density, I would still just be doing that, but it's not. And as I learned that, I got my personal training certification and started working with clients to help improve their bone density because I've always kind of worked with a slightly older clientele. And as they were coming to me with their DEXA scans and learning that walking and yoga weren't enough, I wanted to do everything that I could to help them. So that is why I'm here, and I'm happy to meet you all.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. So, just to reiterate, these incredible credentialed to the gills coaches are here to answer your questions. So, you can drop any questions that are popping into your head in the chat at any time, and we will answer those as we go. But in the meantime, I wanted to address in a little bit more detail this notion of compression, because we've already mentioned that word several times in the context of let's minimize the compression on the spine. In tabletop, there's less compression on the spine. Michaela just mentioned compression fractures, obviously not a good thing either. So this is a little bit counterintuitive and confusing, but not all compression is actually bad. And in this instance, compression, when it's correctly applied, is a really, really good thing. It's what we want to be doing. Michaela, do you want to maybe talk about this a little bit?
Sure. Sorry, I was struggling to find my audio button there for a second, but yes, I would love to. So compression in the right dose is really important. So we're going to kind of dial it back to what is happening at the bone. So in the bone, there are two main cells that we're going to focus on. Those are our osteoblasts. Osteoblasts build the bone, and then osteoclasts, they resorb old bone and kind of get rid of some of that bone tissue. We want both of them to be working, but we want them to be at a even or slightly higher on the osteoblast side of things kind of ratio. So that way that we're not losing bone mass. When we have osteoporosis, unfortunately, the osteoclast activity is higher than the blast activity. We need something to stimulate the cells to tell those osteoblasts to lay down more bone tissue. And that something is external load. It is actually a healthy compression of the spine. And this is like a little bit of that. We have to thread the needle here. So when we think about compression of the spine in a healthy dose for building bone, we want to think about doing that in a nice neutral spine. So that spine is nice and long. It's set up in neutral, like we mentioned before. And that is important when we are loading the bone because we, again, don't want to place too much tissue, too much compression towards the front of the vertebra and risk that compression fracture. But it is the compressive force that tells the osteoblast to lay down new tissue. So it's a little bit of this like dose makes the poison idea coming back to us again, where we need the compression in the right alignment, in the right dose, and then progressed slowly over time so that the bones continue to get that stimulus to lay down new tissue.
That's such a good way to frame it, and then to kind of also make this notion of compression and resistance training in general a little bit less scary. And I think what can sometimes be useful is to think about the same notion in the context of muscle tissue. Like if you had never gone to the gym or you just hadn't been to the gym to lift weights in a while, it would not occur to you to go to the gym and to try to deadlift 500 pounds right off the bat because you would instinctively know that you would be exceeding your muscles, your tissues' load tolerance capacity. So you would take all of those 500 pounds off of the barbell and you would start with something really, really light, something that was within the load tolerance capacity of your tissues. And then you would start by lifting that. And then the next week, you would lift a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. You would progressively increase the weight at the same rate as the load tolerance capacity of your muscles also increased so that they were able to resist those forces. It's the exact same thing with your bones. If the bones have become weakened or brittle or porous, which is what happens in osteoporosis, we don't want to start by loading them with this, metaphorical 500-pound deadlift. We want to start by loading them a little bit because that's the stimulus that is going to let them know, hey, we actually need to become stronger, more dense in order to be able to resist these compressive forces that are being applied to us. And then you add a little bit more, add a little bit more. But it needs to be this progressive thing that increases over time in a very conservative and gradual way. Your bones are also adapting to the ways in which they're being challenged. So it's the exact same principle that bones and muscles respond to different types of loading, but that's besides the point. The big picture principle is the same. Um, let's talk a little bit. Actually, sorry. Yeah, Sally had a question in the chat about reviewing the program structure. Great question. Karen, would you maybe mind talking about this?
Sure, no problem. So the program itself occurs over the course of 13 weeks. The very first week is an introductory week. During that week, you have an hour and a half long meeting with your coach and with Sarah, who's the co-creator of the program. She is a doctor of physical therapy. She does a little movement assessment with you. And during that first week, we actually teach you all of the foundational movement patterns that you're going to need to know for our program. We have you record yourself doing them, and then you're actually sharing those with your coach so that you can get some feedback on your movement pattern. And then the rest of the time, the rest of the 12 weeks is actually broken up into different phases. So in phase one, you're just focusing on really getting your feet underneath you, on learning all of the movement patterns and the exercises that are part of our program. In the second phase, you're focusing on maybe lifting a little bit heavier and challenging yourself a little bit more. And then in phase three, we start focusing on a little bit more nuance in terms of the pace at which we're moving through our exercises. And we have a meeting that goes along with each phase. In addition to that, over the course of the first 5 weeks, you have your introductory week meeting, you have a phase one meeting, and then you actually have three weeks in a row where we have something called office hours. And during those office hours, it's just a half hour of open time for you to chat with your coach and ask any questions that you might have. You can ask for movement demonstrations. You could actually ask us to take a look at you doing an exercise so that we can give you feedback right on the spot. So those are completely determined by whatever questions come up from anyone who's in the cohort.
Perfect answer. And then maybe we can talk a little bit, Kenny, this one could be for you, just about the weekly structure of the program and how people are viewing and completing their workouts and interacting with their coach.
Yeah, absolutely. So we use a online coaching program or portal, if you want to call it that, called CoachRx, where we deliver the information and content right to the app, which you've downloaded on your device. And on a weekly structure, it looks like this. There are 7 days in a week, so we use six of them to our advantage, and we have four strength days that we have built into the program, and then we have an active recovery day, and then we have a yoga day, which is about 30 to 45 minutes of just completing yoga. So with those 6 days in mind, that's kind of the structure. And, we look to slowly, like Karen mentioned, we slowly build the strength portion of the workouts as we go throughout the month. And then we enter the next phase, say phase two, and then we kind of kick off the same movements, but ask a little bit more of your body, ask a little bit more of you with more load. And then in that third phase, the nuanced tempos come in and such. So every week you can look to budget, 60 to 90 minutes for your strength workouts. And the yoga workouts are 30 to 40 minutes, depending on your capabilities and your flow. And then the recovery days are like what we called our buffet. So you get to choose and pick from 1 to 3 different recovery practices. And those are just kind of what you feel like you have time for, or what your body's craving at the end of the week. So we like to structure it in just such a way so that you have optimum recovery, but we still also get that compression and that challenge and that building in. So as you go through the 13 weeks, your endurance and your stamina will increase. You will get quicker and more efficient at the workouts. Did I
Yeah,
miss anything?
exactly. No, I think that was perfect. And the advantage of having the workouts delivered in this way via a remote coaching platform is that you can do them whenever they fit into your day. It would be absolutely crazy and not very effective to have live workout classes, which would require everybody to magically be available at the same time, which would not work at all. So you are doing the workouts whenever they fit into your day. You can even move them around within the week so that the more time-consuming ones are on your less busy days. I'll also add that our coaches, including everybody here, they're so good at time management tips and offering like sneaky ways to break things up and fit them into your schedule. So they will really keep you accountable in a very friendly way so that you can stay on track with all of that. And you're in private communication with your coach throughout the program. So you can leave questions, leave comments. We ask you to track your weights and your reps in the workouts, and all of this data tells your coach how you're doing, how you're recovering, how you're responding to the exercises. And that is what allows them to make more fine-tuned, more individualized suggestions and recommendations to keep you progressing on track. But this is a great question to lead. Michaela, I see you nodding as well. Elaine is asking, please explain how you progress loading with people at different levels of strength. Yeah, awesome question.
Yeah, so that one is it's simple and it's not simple. So everyone is going to have a different perception of what light, medium, and heavy means for them. But we do give some suggested kind of weight ranges that fall within that light, medium, heavy for the exercises in the program. And we give lots of disclaimers that if your version of light, medium, or heavy doesn't land within the suggested range, you have permission to go below or above it, depending on where you land. But everybody's going to kind of pick the weight that is appropriate for them to start with, which we will help you kind of suss out based on your individual needs. So in that intro week, that's when your coach is going to be able to say, like, I think you could start with this weight for this exercise, this weight for that exercise. And then you can test it out and see how it feels in your body. And then from there, you just increase a little bit at a time, and we'll give you those instructions for how to increase by 1 or 2 pounds for some upper body exercises, or maybe by 5 pounds for some of the lower body exercises. But basically, everybody starts at the weight that's appropriate for them, and then they just creep their way up. So even if somebody's weight is different than the person next to them, it's the same process, even if it looks different in terms of the amount of weight or the amount of reps or the amount of sets that they're doing. We just play with those little variables person to person. And in the, like Yanni was saying, in the app, we are able to talk with you privately so we can give you that very specific instruction based on what your experience of the exercise is. So even though you're going through the program as a group, everything is individualized. by the coaching platform.
Yeah, and just to give you a little bit more context, we have people joining the program that have never set foot in a gym or picked up a weight to very seasoned, even accomplished athletes, whether they're endurance athletes or have been strength training for years, but just not doing the exact things that are needed for bone density specifically. So the spectrum of like fitness ability is can be really big within a cohort. But the point is that, you know, the heaviness is completely subjective to you, and that is what you will be working with. You'll be going through the program along with everybody else and following the same structure, which means you're having a very similar experience with the your peers in the cohort, which makes for a nice community aspect to it as well. Donna has a great question. How do you modify instruction for someone with scoliosis as well as other health issues? So I'm obviously going to kick this one to Karen, but I'll start by saying that some of you on this call have probably filled out our intake form already. So you know that we get a lot of data about, you know, there's lots of room there to leave information about other things that you might be dealing with outside of osteoporosis. And we have this huge spreadsheet where all the information about you goes into for the coach to review. And that includes all of these other coaching notes that, you know, get picked up from the intro meeting, any email exchanges or consultations that we've had with you, we dump that all in there. So my point is that if you were to see these intake forms or see this spreadsheet, you would know that virtually every one of our clients is a as well as other health issues person. So this is something that we're very, very habituated to working with: arthritis, other types of spinal conditions, mobility limitations, joint replacements, all of that stuff. And we can definitely talk about all of those if you have questions about any specific item on that list. But for the scoliosis, Karen can tell you all about that.
Hi, Donna. So the reason this question always gets kicked off to me is because I also have scoliosis. And one of the things that it's important to keep in mind is that all of the same things that we would do for osteoporosis are the same things we would do for scoliosis in terms of being really mindful of maintaining a neutral spine while we're under load. And we want to make sure that we're strengthening the muscles of the back, we're strengthening the posture muscles, because those muscles are exactly what hold the spine in place and can help to prevent further curve progression. So these are all things that you're going to learn working with us. And then, as you know, Jenny kind of alluded to with the any other health conditions, it's rare that somebody is coming in from their mid 50s or 60s and beyond without some kind of health issue, whether that's a frozen shoulder, disc issues. We've had people come in post compression fracture in their vertebra after they've healed. We have people with hip and knee replacements, osteoarthritis. So we're very, very used to working with people on an individual basis to make sure that the exercises that you're doing fit you and work for you in your body.
That's a perfect answer coming from somebody with both the professional expertise and the personal experience as well. And I think another thing that we've mentioned on these calls with regards to scoliosis before is that this is another instance where the individualized coaching really goes a long way, because no two curves are the same, and tolerance to different movements, especially asymmetrical movements like lunges, can really vary quite a lot. So it really is a case of just letting your coach know, like, hey, that felt really wonky and crunchy on the one side and like totally fine on the other side. What should I do? And these are the things that they are all extremely well versed in addressing as part of the program. Great question about if a weighted vest is included. So it is a piece of equipment that we include as part of our equipment list for the program that you'll purchase. But this is a great jumping off point to maybe talk about the weight vest a little bit more in general. Michaela or Kenny, would either one of you like to talk about how we use it and what it's good for?
Sure. So how we use it in a circuit, and you'll see, you know, what it's good for based on what's in the circuit. But we use it in a circuit within our workout that includes some impact exercises and some balance exercises. Why we use a weighted vest is because it's a really nice way to add some additional axial load. So we kind of have touched on axial load. That's that healthy compression that's coming from the top down through the axis of our body, which is our spine. And so that weight vest creates a really nice kind of full, evenly loaded. So sorry, let me just restart that sentence. That weight vest provides a really nice compression that evenly loads around the vertebra. So that way we're not putting too much in the front or too much in the back. We're evenly loading it. And what we know about the weight vest from the research is that we cannot really isolate bone building effects to simply wearing a weight vest. Most of the research done with weight vests are combined with either resistance training or impact training. And we already know that those two styles of training are what have been proven to be effective for bone building. So we can't pull the weight vest out and say that is why it's effective. But we can say the studies that include that have include the weight vest with those styles of training have improvements in bone density. So let's copy what we're seeing happen there. So that's why we use it in that specific weight in that specific circuit of the program. And then was there another part to that question? I'm sorry. Or was that everything?
Maybe you can just talk a little bit. I think you referenced the studies kind of combining the different modalities and how the weight vest is not it shouldn't be your only bone density intervention, but
Mm-hmm.
it does have a few other benefits that can be really useful.
Yeah, where I was trying to go there was that um we also see improved balance in studies where you do exercises wearing balance exercises wearing the weight vest. We do see improvements in balance there. So we use it in our first circuit of the workout. That's a little bit of a warm up. So you're getting your body warmed up, moving, including some impact, including some balance, so we can kind of reap as much benefit from the weight vest as possible. But we also know that there's kind of a limiting factor on how much you're going to be able to progress the weight of a weight vest. So we don't use it as the bread and butter of our program, but rather like a cherry on top. And we really prioritize the functional strength training movements as the key principles for bone building in our program.
Yeah, exactly. And the weight vest can be really good, like Michaela said, for adding a little bit of that external, that axial load, as well as these benefits like better balance, better core strength, even like single leg stability and hip strength, I think has been reported in some studies. But if you imagine trying to continually progress the weight that you're using in the weight vest, you would just be like stifled under under the weight of it, and you wouldn't be getting any of the functional benefits of an actual movement program, especially with these traditional resistance training exercises that really effectively mimic the movement tasks of daily life, like hinging, picking things up, moving things overhead, things like that, carrying heavy items in like a farmer's carry, groceries, your grandchild. So these are all things that become a lot easier when you're also training those movements in the context of a well-designed exercise program. Jody has a great question. I will be out of town for the first 3 days of the January cohort. Will I be able to start in January, or do I need to wait for the next start date? Kenny, maybe you can talk a little bit about this in the context of the intro week.
Yeah, great question, Jody. I would say since I will be leading that particular cohort, I think that missing the first 3 days isn't too big of a deal, and that's why we have that introductory week built into the program, and that allows for time to film movements, adjust to these new stimuli that you're getting from strength training, get your equipment together, finish up your trip, whatever you're doing. So, in my opinion, I think that's fine. If you said the first 3 weeks, I'd say probably not the best idea, but a couple days at the beginning of the cohort isn't too big of a deal. But that introductory week is really is key so that we can kind of see you move on camera. We can get to know you a little bit more. We can learn about the subtleties of your program and your training and how we're going to kind of proceed forward through the intro week into the first week of strength training. And really, it's just getting used to Coach RX and the app, and that can be a lot for people at first as you kind of get used to maneuvering around a new technology. And we really like the app a lot. It has a lot of awesome features, and the ability to film yourself and send it to us is one of the ones that we use probably the most. So that first week is really key to, getting uh, moving into the program, but it's not the end all be all. So missing the first 3 days, no big deal. What was the second part of that, Yanni? I feel like I.
Oh, she was just asking if she needed to wait to start for the next wait
Oh,
for the
okay.
next start date. But
Hmm.
like you said, I don't think that is necessary if you're able to keep up with some very light content programming in those first 3 days of the intro week.
For sure.
And
And
we do send out a really comprehensive onboarding email as well, like when you register.
mm,
So when you sign up, depending on how much time there is to go until the start of the cohort, you have all of that time to review the materials, get familiar with things, order the equipment if you need to. When you register, that's also when, you gain access to your coach and they can advise you on weight choices and things like that too. So, earlier registration does give you the advantage of having that little bit of extra time, even though the intro week is designed to be kind of a nice little buffer as well for just getting settled in, figuring things out, asking questions, getting your stuff that you still need. The other thing that I'll mention is that the first day of every cohort does have that intro meeting, which is a big old download of information and logistics about what to expect. It's 90 minutes long because we cover so much information in it. And it's a really nice opportunity, obviously, to meet your coach and the rest of your cohort via Zoom as well. So if you attend one meeting out of the 13 weeks, we do recommend that it be that one, if
please.
at all possible. But all of the meetings are recorded and they're emailed out to the group later in the day that they happened. So if you could, for some reason, not make that intro meeting, as long as you were able to review the recording later, and then, if any questions remained, you would be able to connect with Kenny via CoachRx or via email with any other questions. That would be totally fine as well.
And
Uh,
that was what I was gonna add that in. I
yeah.
was gonna say everything's recorded and everything is available to watch on your own time. And in that first week, we are right there holding your hand. Like you can reach out to us basically any time of the day, and we'll get back to you and make sure that you feel supported and feel like the introductory week is just that, getting you off the ground and getting you running into that first workout on week number 2. So
Yeah, it's there to get you set up for success, and the whole team basically anticipates hearing from you with your questions in that time. So and yes, as Michaela said in the chat, the next cohort after the January 12th one starts on February 11th. So we typically have programs starting at about 4 to 5 week intervals. Sometimes it'll be a little bit less or a little bit more if we're trying to avoid like a big holiday right around the start date. Okay, so we've talked a bunch. These are great questions, by the way. Keep dropping them into the chat and we'll keep answering them. But we've talked a lot about resistance and impact training, how the axial loading from those is actually the thing that catalyzes bone density improvements. But we do also incorporate yoga in our program. And Karen, I'm wondering if you can maybe talk a little bit about this, what yoga is helpful for, what its limitations are in the context of osteoporosis and bone density, because I think this is really useful for people to understand as well.
Absolutely. So yoga has a lot of really nice benefits, and many of them have to do with more like mind-body connection and nervous system. So we know from the research that yoga really does not help directly with bone density. And part of the reason for that is because it's a body weight exercise. So similar to walking, similar to Pilates. There's no way to progressively overload that particular exercise. We're not lifting weights when we do yoga. We're not wearing a weight vest. So there's no external loading happening. So once your bones have gotten strong enough to handle whatever you're doing in yoga, there was really no impetus for them to get any stronger than they already are. That said, when we do yoga, it can really help with our balance. It helps with our proprioception, which is just our ability to know where we are in space. And for one area of our body to understand where the rest of our body is. So it's really nice for helping with alignment and mechanics and things like that. And in addition to that, there's some evidence that yoga actually helps to kind of downregulate the nervous system, and it helps to turn down the inflammatory response and helps to turn up the anti-inflammatory response. And that just creates a really nice holistic environment for increased bone density. So when you combine that with strength training, now we're kind of giving the body everything that it needs in order to get a little bit stronger in a really healthy way.
I love that you mentioned the anti-inflammatory and stress management aspects of things, because one of the things that we, see and hear very regularly in our incoming clients is that the diagnosis itself is highly stressful and very anxiety provoking. So that is something that, is helpful to manage so that you can just generally feel more at ease in your brain and in your body just on a day-to-day basis. And yoga is really wonderful for giving you the tools to kind of regulate all of that a little bit better. And we do include, especially like, we have the yoga day, but then we also have the recovery day where the choices are basically between guided nervous system down regulation. So, like a guided meditation or relaxation, a breathing exercise, which is also designed to be relaxing and calming, and often some self myofascial release, which is also like a gentle way to calm the nervous system. So we do have those built in regularly for a very good reason, even though they
Oh,
might seem a little bit like this is just like nice fluff to have in there, but it's so much more than that. And in general, when people are highly stressed and they're living in a state of like high nervous system activation where you feel jittery and anxious and on edge, that is not a good place from which to initiate movement in general. Like exercise naturally has um, stress management capabilities, but on the whole, we're going to do a much better job with our workouts and have a better experience and get better results when we're coming at it from a place of feeling like grounded and mentally calm rather than being really like highly strung and anxious about things. So the yoga really plays such a big role, even though it's not something that can really improve bone density, but it is so important for overall well-being, and it really helps with the recovery side of things too, which means that you're actually Michaela, maybe you can talk about this because I feel like sometimes the recovery pieces people are like, I'll just skip that one, like that one isn't less fun and not as exciting, but actually it's kind of like really critical to making progress in the long run. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so our exercise is actually when we're putting some stress on the body, and we all think of stress as a bad thing because we live in a world where we tend to be a little bit maybe too stressed out. But stress is a good thing when it's in the right dose and for the right purpose. But our exercise routine is a stress on the body, and we're placing that stress on our muscles, on our bones. And then the recovery is actually when we rebuild and repair, and that's when we actually get stronger. So the both pieces need to happen in order for the intended outcome to result. So we really do need to take that intentional downtime, the time off from lifting weights, the time off from kind of impact and stressing the body, just for a day or two to allow the body to repair, rebuild, to lay down new bone tissue, to rebuild new muscle fibers. And that is when you actually make most of the progress in the goals that you're kind of intending during your strength training session. So you need both pieces to really complete the puzzle there.
Yeah, great answer. I feel like recovery is honestly one of the most like underrated and misunderstood aspects of athletic training, but it's so important. That's where the actual progress is made, is when you're just chilling out and feeling really relaxed. Um, Let's talk a little bit about progression, this concept of progressive overload. And maybe we can tie into this. Kenny, I think you're the perfect person to dive into this a little bit further. But we often get this question of, do I have to lift heavy, from people who, obviously the Lift More study is like the landmark study, and people were lifting very heavy in there. So maybe you can talk about this concept of progressive overload, just recap it briefly, and then talk about the approach that we take, knowing that starting with really heavy lifting is probably not accessible, either from a strength perspective or from an equipment perspective for a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. So I like to start out by saying when we start our cohort out, we meet you where you are in your journey. So, like Yenny hinted at, we have people who have come in who have never set foot in a gym. So, the concept of maybe even squatting a 10-pound dumbbell is pretty terrifying. And I've also coached people who come in who are already squatting over 100 pounds with a barbell. So, meeting you where you are is kind of how I approach the coaching, and that's why the intake is so important. And this concept of progressive overload is kind of scary for a lot of people. The concept is really just, we've hinted at it, just slowly increasing your loads over time, allowing the body and really the mind to adapt to the loads that we're putting at them. So that's really it in a nutshell. So you can think of it as starting out week one with a 5 pound weight, and then week two, maybe progressing to a 6 pound weight. And then week three, maybe staying at 6 pounds. And then maybe in week four, you're feeling great and you can go to 7 or to 8. So that's kind of the concept of progressive overload. And obviously, it's more nuanced than that, but we kind of structure our program in just such a way that you will progressively load throughout the month. And then we will keep that going throughout the 13 weeks. So that's kind of the progressive overload theory. And then from there, how do we build that into our programming? So that's why the more information that you can give us, the better, right? The videos, the concepts, the note taking, making sure that you're communicating with your coach to let them know how things are feeling, right? Because the internal motivation comes from you to challenge yourself, and we have lots of guidelines that help you kind of establish how hard you should be pushing during the workouts. So I don't want to dive into that concept today; it's too much, but we can guide you through the workouts and allow you to challenge yourself appropriately. So as the workout starts, we start slower, we build up, we build intensity, and then when we finish the workout, that's where the most work is done, and that's where the highest level of bone building and muscle building will happen in the training. And then we reset and we do it again. So we have that guide, we have that process. We've done this many times before, so we can certainly guide you from point A to point B and make sure that this progressive overload theory isn't so terrifying. So, hope that
Yeah,
helps.
even the word overload sounds like,
I
well,
know.
it shouldn't be
Yeah.
overloading. Like that sounds
Yeah. It should
horrible.
just be
But
progressive loading, but
yeah, just ignore
unfortunately,
the
that's
over
where
part.
that's how it's been established. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and actually, that's the perfect answer, Kenny. Thanks so much for explaining that. I see the question about ways to keep up after the cohort ends, so we'll definitely get to that. But Karen, I was hoping that while we're on this topic of increasing the challenge, you can talk a little bit about how, again, the weight is not the end all be all, and we have all these other ways to provide the novelty that is needed and the stimulus to support those long-term bone density gains.
Yeah, so we're always taking into consideration where you're coming from. And Ken and Michaela and Yenny have all sort of touched on this. If you've never lifted a weight before and you're just starting the program, you might actually only start out doing one set of a particular exercise because that's all you have in terms of your capacity currently. So one of the things you may be working toward is eventually adding a second set and then a third set. Most of the time where our exercises have up to 3 sets included, or you're doing it for time. So you may be doing a lesser amount of time or fewer sets. You might be doing fewer repetitions. So then the way that we could progressively overload would include not only increasing the amount of weight that you're doing, but slowly increasing the number of sets that you're doing, or slowly increasing the number of repetitions, or increasing the range of motion that you're going through. If you're going through a larger range of motion, it makes an exercise a little bit more challenging. So there are so many different ways that we can overload. And that's one of the things that allows us to really customize a program to meet a person exactly where they are, because we have so many different tools at the ready that we can use to help you do that. And that's one of those ways where Ken keeps saying this, that communication that we have with you is so important. The more information you can give to us in terms of how intense a particular exercise feels in your body, the better able we are to give you the feedback that you need.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't have to have nightmares about like, how am I going to build up to squatting 200 pounds? Like there's so many tweaks that can be made along the way, including slightly changing something about the squat that makes it feel different and loads you a little bit differently. So there's an infinite number of variations and like little dials that we can tweak along the way to keep that sort of novelty aspect to it, which is really what your bones and your muscles want. That's what makes them think like, oh, this was new. We need to get stronger in this particular way to be able to deal with this later. I hope that answered your question. So, really good question here about do you offer ways to keep up after the cohort ends? Yes, we do. Michaela, maybe you can talk a little bit about this.
Sure. We have a maintenance program that you can subscribe to once you have finished the 13-week program. The maintenance program is a monthly subscription, so you can kind of sign up, cancel, shift tiers, do what you need to do there. And it's kind of just like a Netflix where it's going to bill on the same day of the month every month. And within that maintenance program, I kind of alluded, we have a few different tiers depending on how much support you need from your coach. So if you're someone who maybe has a little bit more experience with strength training and you go through the 13-week program and you feel really confident with the principles and the movement, you would probably be someone who would opt for the lower tier, which doesn't have any coach support, but you get a monthly program. And within this monthly program, it is designed to progress over time with you. So you get those inbuilt progression tips and tools. There's information in the program about how you can play with the variables that Karen just beautifully outlined for us. Um, so that's the lowest tier of the maintenance program. The next tier, you get everything I just said, that programming delivered monthly. And then on top of that, you get access to join monthly office hours with rotating coaches. These, for the maintenance program, these are full hour sessions, and anybody who's in the maintenance program at that middle or higher tier can join these. And just like we kind of mentioned at the beginning, the office hours for the maintenance program run really similar to how they do in the original 13-week program, where you guys come with the questions, we support as best we can and answer those and guide you through. So that's where you can ask more nuanced questions about your own progression or any exercises or navigating injuries. Those are topics that all came up at the last office hour. And then the final tier, the highest tier, is everything I just mentioned. Plus, you get weekly access to your coach, so you can still communicate through CoachRx. They keep an eye on your weights, your progression, and they support you in kind of moving through with a little bit more individualized guidance. So we've got those three tiers, and they're kind of always building on each month so that you can continue to progress and get stronger and build that bone density.
Thanks so much, Michaela. That outlines it really, really nicely. And I'll add too that we are constantly updating our programming as new research comes out about what works and what is most effective. So whenever something like that happens, we let you know, like the people in the program, like, hey, here are some changes that we made recently based on this new research that came out. So it's kind of a living, breathing thing. And we also are always seeking feedback. We have a client advisory committee and a private Facebook group, which I'll mention in a little bit more detail. But these are essentially people that have gone through our program who understand it really, really well, what the service is. And we're constantly outsourcing suggestions from them on ways we can improve it and what features we can add to make it better for you. So the program is constantly evolving, not just in terms of the content, but also how it's delivered so that it is like really geared towards helping you support those long-term bone density gains. And then, yes, I wanted to mention in terms of ways to keep up after the cohort ends, we just very recently started a private Facebook group for graduates of our program. So this is by invite only. It's not like a public thing that turns into a whole toxic commenting mess. So this is for people who have only been through the program, and we use that to share research updates. Recently, a program graduate sent me a recommendation for a really great book on muscle that we shared with the group as well. People are able to post their updates, their progress there too. So it's a really nice way to stay connected to not just your own cohort members, but the people from previous cohorts as well. So we're working constantly to make that a really dynamic and engaging and inclusive community as well. Okay, and I see a nutrition question. I'll kick that over to Michaela in a second, but since we have just a couple of minutes left, just a reminder to drop your questions into the chat, any burning conundrums in your head right now. And I'll also mention we've been primarily talking about our January 12th program start date, because the one that is scheduled to start on December 10th, which is technically the next one, is actually sold out. We had to close the registration a couple of weeks early because of the demand, and we do expect the January one to similarly fill up quite quickly. So if you're interested, I would not delay too long signing up. Lots of people are using their HSA and FSA funds, which expire at the end of the year, to pay for the program as well. So that's creating a little bit of an additional influx. And if you have any questions at all, then of course just respond to any of our emails. We'll schedule a free consultation with you to chat through everything. And the other thing I wanted to mention in relation to this is that our prices are going to increase a little bit on January 1st, but you can buy any of our currently open cohorts. So that's January, February, March at the 2025 prices, the current lower prices, until December 31st. We're mentioning this in our newsletters till all of you are hopefully blue in the face with reminders about this. But if you're
Oh,
considering any of the Q1 cohorts for next year, now is a great time to secure your spot for all those reasons that I just mentioned. Um, and now we switch to the nutrition component. Michaela, maybe you can talk a little bit about this since this is your domain.
Sure. So we do not have a specific nutrition component to the program. That is something that is being talked about in the background. We're juggling a few different exciting balls right now, but that is something that we have talked about and hopefully will be coming soon. We do supply a guidebook, and within that guidebook, there is a section about nutrition. It's pretty basic. It includes kind of information on macros, making sure that you're eating enough. And then there's a section about micronutrients, so vitamins and minerals that are supportive to bone health, as well as a section about supplementation. Um, any specific questions around nutrition do need to be in a client patient kind of setting. So we aren't able to really kind of dive into those within the program, but we are able to offer some big picture nutrition advice, like fueling for your workouts and kind of supporting the goals within the context of the program, as long as they're big picture. But if you want to work with a nutritionist who supports bone density, I am a nutritionist who supports bone density. I'd be happy to chat. You can just shoot me an email.
Yeah, perfect answer. And those questions do come up a lot. So even, Michaela's making it sound very like high level and maybe even a bit vague, but the information that is shared in that context is still incredibly valuable because under fueling in women is a very common thing that we see in the athletic realm. So even just getting the basic information about your macros, the timing of your protein intake, all of that stuff is really that's kind of the base foundation of what we should all be doing in order to, exercise effectively and maintain bone density and muscle strength. So implementing all of that stuff is kind of the foundation, and then you can refine on top of that if you do want to work with somebody like Michaela who can give you that more individualized guidance in the context of like an informed client-provider relationship. So hopefully that answers the question. We do get asked about the nutrition side of things quite a bit. So we are working on potentially implementing something like that. That could be like an add-on or a post-program thing that you engage in. If there's any final questions, now is the time. Like I mentioned, we're very easy to get hold of if you do have any other questions or queries. Most of you are probably here because you are subscribed to our newsletter, and hitting reply on any of our newsletters gets the message either to myself directly or to our executive assistant, Joyce, who's here on the call as well and is constantly on the lookout for your questions and your emails. All of our emails say that we answer within 3 business days, but in reality, we are very twitchy about answering much sooner than that. So you can always expect a response a bit faster than that. And thank you again for taking some time out of your day to come and join this live Q&A. We love doing these. It's super fun for us, and we love hearing the things that you're thinking about, like what are the questions, what are the areas of confusion. So these are really fun for us to be able to do as well, and we sincerely appreciate you taking time to come hang out with us and share your journey and where you're at with us. If there's anything else that we can assist with, like I said, just hit reply on any of those emails. The replay of this will be sent out tomorrow, and there'll be another reminder about our upcoming cohorts. And we're basically here to help you on your bone health journey. So we're so happy to have you in our community and grateful that you came and spent some time with us. Thank you. Happy holidays to you as well, Pam. So we hope to see all of you online soon at some point. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions, and have a great rest of your week. Thank you to Karen, Michaela, and Kenny as well for joining. Really great to have you here. Thanks for your insights and your expertise. Thank you all. Have a great day. Bye-bye.